So welcome everyone, chocolate lovers everywhere of any flavor, to this edition of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay Gordon. Today I'm going to be joined by the near and far Heinde Verre, Jan-Willem Jekel and Ewald Rietberg of Heinde Verre in Rotterdam. We're going to be talking about their history, how they make chocolate, their approaches, how it's a little different, and a bunch of other things, as well as take your questions. So stay put, and we'll be back after the intro. So welcome again, everyone, to this edition of The Chocolate Life Live. My name is Clay, and today I'm joined by the co-founders of Heinde Verre out of Rotterdam, specialty chocolate makers, craft chocolate makers. And we're going to be talking today with them a little bit about their origin story and also a discussion about their approach to chocolate making. And I want to start off by giving the two of them an opportunity to introduce themselves, to talk about how they first met each other, if that's appropriate to the story, but how they came together to decide to start Heinde Verre and their approach to making chocolate. So Jan-Willem, Ewald, who wants to start?
You start.
All right. Well, thank you, Clay, for inviting us. It's always a pleasure to have a discussion with you and also providing the opportunity to meet other chocolate makers, also chocolate sellers, and available in this broadcast. Well, my name is Jan-Willem Jekel. I'm also a co-founder of Heinde Verre, and
my name is Ewald Rietberg, co-founder of Heinde Verre. We met each other at the Royal Dutch Telecoms Company a long time ago as a corporate strategist working for the board of management. Thinking out of all kinds of strategic plans, but also we found out that we both are lovers of great food. My background is wine. Jan-Willem is a pastry enthusiast, so it didn't take long when we were colleagues. It didn't take long to start, let's say, making trips together, culinary trips and skiing trips, but basically all centered around wine, food, and.
Imagine visiting a lot of vineyards, having nice trips, nice conversation about food, drinking wine, tasting regional foods all across Europe. And yes, and during one of those trips, actually, I believe we were in Italy. Yeah?
It was Bergamo.
And I think it was also a skiing trip there where we had a chocolate bar at the local airport. And
considerably poor quality.
It was. you can say that again.
Okay.
And the thing is that while we were eating it, we both came to the conclusion: well, this is not okay. We can do a better job. It must be done better, and it's also pity. And that was many years ago. Actually,
I think it was 2010, probably 2010, 11. No, later, 2012. But also at that time, we were already intrigued by the story of the Mars brothers, how they came to making chocolate and taking a different approach. And we were also a big fan of older Dutch brands, chocolate brands, which had disappeared already. So this is also why we took the approach of establishing what we call a Dutch brand of chocolate in the Dutch tradition of chocolate making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So let's jump back there. Familiarize me if you can. So when I think of the Dutch tradition of chocolate making, so I'm going to go back in history. I mean, the Dutch are really, really important in the history of chocolate making. Obviously, in the early 1800s, you have the Van Houten family, who are responsible for patenting the cocoa butter press, for inventing the process of alkalization. We're familiar with, I think, perhaps most of it would be familiar with the Droste brand, right? And yeah, and I'm not, but jump forward into about the time you're starting, 2003 or so, we have the beginning of Tony's, and the less said about them, the better. But as an American, I'm not all that familiar with the tradition of Dutch chocolate making on a retail level. I know about them, as a processor of cocoa. 25% of the world's cocoa can be processed in the Port of Zaandam, by like 3 or 4 factories that are there, which is just a mind-boggling number. But the tradition of Dutch chocolate making is what, if you can?
After Van Houten, there were a lot of brands established in the Netherlands, which probably you will not be familiar with, but like Korf, Bensdorp, based in Amsterdam or around Amsterdam or in Rotterdam, basically in this western part of the Netherlands. Klatta, Driesen were brands from Rotterdam. Chocolate, that was focusing mainly on Indonesian cacao at that time. Droste is one of the more familiar brands, probably. So there were the most famous one actually was Ringers, which was the first bean-to-bar brand in the Netherlands that really focused on quality chocolate, and it was founded in 1920s, somewhere back that time. First in Alkmaar, later in Rotterdam. And after the Second World War, most of these brands have disappeared. In let's say, the cause of the upscaling of the chocolate industry. Ringers, for example, the founder of Ringers and the owner, the director, insisted that all the beans had to be sorted by hand, and which actually created a situation where he could not deliver the volume. So the shops were moving away, and he lost his brand. And then later on, the brand was bought and used for sugar-free diabetes chocolate, and then it disappeared again. So.
Okay. Well, so Ringers disappeared, but there's another brand there that I know is still in business, Bensdorp, which is now part of the evil empire that is Barry Callebaut.
Most brands are bought up by Callebaut or something.
But certainly there's been an enormous amount of consolidation. What we think of as a Belgian chocolate company is actually an amalgam of Belgian and Swiss and Dutch and German and Spanish companies coming forward.
Also, if you look at, because what these brands were doing, actually, most of those brands were sourcing cacao from Ecuador, Venezuela, the higher quality countries. Some of them were using Indonesia. Verkade was also using Brazilian cacao, also in the Caribbean areas. So basically, those were the areas where they were sourcing the cacao. So the style of these chocolates were, by and large, they used quite low roast, let's say not a very high dark roast, but lower than, for example, the Belgian chocolates. And they were coached maybe a bit longer, so they were very smooth and delicate chocolate, and they used beet sugar. Unrefined.
We're going to get to beet sugar in a moment, because I think it's really important. Really important. But first thing I want to say is I want to say hello and thank you to Chocoa Verkopers. I'm not certain if I pronounced that properly. Could one of you two gentlemen do me the favor of pronouncing it properly?
It's Paul or Emma. They sell online across the Netherlands, and I think also across Europe. I'm not sure.
Yeah, sure. They supply chocolate to all of Europe. Yeah, they're a nice customer to us.
Yep. So he's tuning in today, and I want to say thank you very much. Also, Namib Fox, who says your story is so inspiring. I agree with you. They have some questions, and we're going to get to them in just a moment. But I'm sorry.
No, just let them just fire ahead. But yeah.
So what I want to do is I want to say that. So I met you, Eval. I don't know if Jan Willem was in the stand at the time, but you Chocoa 2020. So it's mid-February, and I walked by your stand, and you were talking about just how Dutch beet sugar is the best sugar in the world, right? And so, that sort of perked up my ears. That sort of language I'm sort of skeptical of, because nobody argues that they use the second best anything, right? The Swiss have the best milk powder.
Yes, I still remember your reply was, but also about the cow milk, by the way. The same.
Of course, and I've been to it. I was at my first trip to Amsterdam ever. I went with Case Rat to the farm, just on the other side of the river, where he picks all the dairy up for his ice cream. And so, I'm familiar with the argument about all that kind of stuff. Yeah. But, specifically, I mean, beet sugar plays an important role in a lot of things. But in your particular approach, I mean, you're going to make an argument. Look, I'm going to let you make the argument for me about the difference between a Dutch beet sugar and unrefined cane sugar that other people might be using. So please do.
Sure, there are many differences, but also what I find this is also a nice opportunity to explain. Heinde Verre means near and far. It's actually the thing that we do. We source cacao from far away, building, as we discussed before, about the tradition of sourcing great ingredients around the world. That's a really Dutch tradition, but we also combine it with local produce. So therefore, the Netherlands is well known for its dairy. So for the famous Dutch cows, for the famous Dutch cheese, but also all the local produce is indeed the Dutch sugar beet. And the difference between Dutch sugar beet is, there are actually two reasons why we choose it. Is that one, it has a clean taste. It means that if you take, for example, sugarcane, when you take sugarcane, it contains quite a large amount of melasse, which has a strong caramel taste, which is lovely on its own, of course, but you are adding flavor to your bars, in our opinion.
This is why we always say that most of the craft or specialty chocolate bars made with two ingredients, being unrefined cane sugar and cocoa, are, in our opinion, are flavored bars.
Mm-hmm. Right, because you have to factor in the flavor of the unrefined cane sugar.
Sugar pure as a sweetener.
Right, and I would make the same point about something like coconut nectar. Right, coconut nectar often has a very distinct flavor. So if you're using it or using muscovado or using any one of a number of other sugars, it's a flavoring ingredient, not just a sweetener.
Exactly. So therefore, if you add in our case, sugar beet, it has a very neutral taste, which allows us the cocoa origin to shine. And that's something what we really like about the Dutch sugar beet. So
it also gives us the opportunity to work with very, let's say, delicate notes or make distinguish, because these molasses normally drive out the more delicate or more lighter flavors. And sometimes the criticism we get on chocolate is that it could be a bit more firm or a bit more strong, and because it's very delicate and usually quite light in flavor. But also the only way to get these light flavors in is by using these neutral sugars.
And also, in addition, why we also love to work with local sugar beet, because it's locally sourced, the CO2 footprint is much lower. For example, if you compare it to sugarcane, which are refined in the tropics, it needs to be shipped to the Netherlands. The CO2 footprint is 4 times higher than local sourced sugar beet,
even though it's not organic certified.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Understand. I mean, I've had this discussion here on the Chocolate Life and elsewhere about quality being a basket of attributes, and each one of us has our own collection of attributes in our basket, and we value those attributes differently. And so for some people, organic certification is an important attribute. I think that more and more, I think one of the things the industry needs to do as it moves towards more sustainable production is to think about this notion of what is the footprint associated with, shipping 25% waste from a foreign country, all right, in the form of cocoa beans. I mean, we're going to throw away the shell. We've got some water. When we get done, the usable nibs is 20-25%. What is the impact of shipping that? Yeah.
Yeah. And you also have to look how it is produced at the source. So the Netherlands is, to be honest, quite efficient in producing and using low energy to produce the sugar. Therefore, it has also a lower footprint.
Yeah, it consumes less water than sugar cane, for example. So all the pulp and everything that's left over from, let's say, take sugar out is being put back on the land again as fertilizer. So it's almost a circular process.
Okay. Well, before we leave the subject of sugar, I want to talk about a specific sugar. The two of you and I had a conversation, I think back October, November last year, for an article I was writing for International Confectionery on sweeteners and alternative sugars. And we focused on, I think, a fabulous Dutch product called bastard suiker. Can you tell me a little bit about what bastard suiker is? I remember that it is has a geographic indicator. It's a protected designation of origin. It's the origins of manufacturing the sugar go back to the 1600s or something like that. So it's used a lot in pastry and baking. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of bastard suiker and what it does in chocolate?
It is an appellation contrôlée sugar indeed.
Indeed, it is protected by the European Union. Mm-hmm. To be honest, a lot of Dutch people don't know it either. That is such a special, because it's so ubiquitous in the Netherlands. You can get it anywhere. But however, it is a regional product. It is a typical Dutch product. And the way it's produced, it is a combination of refined sugars and invert sugar. And for the foreigner listeners, it has a really strong caramel flavor to it. And even there are different ingredients of caramel flavor to it. And the thing is that we have it already for centuries in the Netherlands. And the thing is that the application in the tradition is a lot of in pastries. So meaning we have a lot of type of cookies or doughs which specifically use the bastard suiker, and the qualities of bastard suikers also changes the product. For example, how it is baked in the oven. So we've got, for example, Zeelse bolussen. They can only be made with bastard suiker.
It gives a different structure to the pastry.
And I understand, sort of generically, there is a name for pastries like this. They're called wet. Is that correct?
Yes. It delivered wettish pastry. Yes.
So there's a very, very unusual mouthfeel to it. So for a little bit of translation here, bastard suiker tends to come in 3 grades. So there's a white, there's a medium brown, and a dark brown. So white, light. So it's like brown sugar here in the United States. We have a light brown and a dark brown. And the difference is, I'm sorry?
The white one is a typical 2-ingredient sugar.
Right.
It contains crystal sugar and normal sugar, and which is fine grained, by the way, so like caster sugar and fruit sugar. And then some caramel is added for the light brown, and some caramel and dark caramel syrup is added for the dark brown bastard sugar.
So what I want to do here is, I was fortunate enough. I mean, I think about My Chocolate Life and what it does, and for me it is the opportunity to meet with incredibly talented, very, very creative people who are doing fun stuff, and we get to become friends, and I get to share their work product and things like that. So last year was the 20th anniversary of The Chocolate Life, and I approached Jan Willem and Ewald about producing a chocolate for me for my 20th anniversary. This is the last remaining of a limited edition of 42 boxes. It's backwards, but this is box number 42 of 42. Hand labeled, and it's Hollandse hazelnut and bastard suiker chocolate. So one of the things I learned is that it never occurred to me that hazelnuts grew in the Netherlands. So mind blown, number one. And this is my, and not only that, but it's 2 different varieties of hazelnuts from some farm, from some farmer you guys have known for quite some time. And so we'll get to this, there's a blend of hazelnuts in here. But the bastard suiker, I think, has provides, in this particular case, some depth and complexity around the nuts. And there's a softness to the texture, I think, that goes in with the invert sugar, which is really, really quite remarkable. I mean, I am never going to open this up. I know that if I rip open the pouch in here, that the delicate aromatics of this are going to be gone in a couple of hours. I mean, when I was, there were a couple of these left over, and what I would do is I would say, okay, I'm going to commit to eating the entire bar right away, because I know that if I leave it until tomorrow, it's going to be a very, very different chocolate.
This bar, by the way, is special for us as well, because before that we had never. This is like a Dutch gianduja, and it was the first time we produced a chocolate like that. So for us, this was also a bit of a gamble. How would the busted sugar work out? How would we know Dutch hazelnuts? They have like a more chestnut-like aroma compared to the hazelnuts that we all are familiar with. But we didn't, to be honest, we didn't know in advance exactly how this would work out. But the structure of the busted sugar is really nice because the gianduja is even more smooth than any other gianduja you would probably have tasted.
Yeah.
No, it was. Now, are you making this on a regular basis and selling it now?
No.
No, we did one limited edition after the 42 of the similar recipe, and that limited edition had like 120 bars, something like that.
That was really limited.
And that was it. We peeled all the hazelnuts by hand, and we don't want to go through the process again that often. So,
I'm sure. Well, let me see if there's a way that we can figure out how to convince you to do another limited edition. I want to point out really quickly while I have you here, is that we have a member of the Chocolate Life who's in the chat, Mark from Blue Spruce Chocolate. And I've been working with Mark on a consulting basis for quite some time. And I convinced him to do a version of his caramelized white chocolate. So we have two different versions. You can see one is slightly lighter than the other, one is slightly darker than the other. But one of them is made with refined sugar, and the other one is made with white Bastardsuiker, which is the only variety he's been able to find here in the United States. Is this white Bastardsuiker, and I can tell you that the differences are really, really subtle, but really, really profound.
Well, it's the experience with working with Bastardsuiker. It's fun.
Yeah. So, it's, we're going, I believe he's going to be doing a couple of more experiments at doing a milk chocolate and a dark chocolate with a Bastardsuiker and some other things. And so I'm really, really looking for, I'm sorry?
Let's agree. We send you a couple of bags of white and light brown Bastardsuiker to experiment with.
Well, what I'm more interested in, we'll take this offline, is I'm currently working with a consulting company out of the southwest of the United States, and they're setting up a new manufacturing facility and consulting, and we're going to be opening up a school so people can come and learn chocolate making, and we're also going to be offering equipment and ingredients. And so I'm actually interested in bringing over not just a couple of bags, but if you want to send me bags, I will, happily, especially if we can have the other two grades, so the medium and the dark, just to be able to compare them. But eventually what I want to do is I want to bring over pallets for people, so that we can, in bulk, so that we can teach people about using it. I want to use it in the school to be able to use this an experiment for playing with sugar. So here's the same recipe: a conventional sugar, an unrefined cane sugar, a coconut sugar, and this Bastardsuiker. So, to think about sugar as an ingredient and the impact it has on chocolate, I think it's really important. So I just wanted to let you, I wanted to say thank you very much to Mark at Blue Spruce, who's in Colorado, for sharing this with me. And to let you guys know that, I've been listening to you and the experience that I have, and I've been sharing what it is that I learned from you with other people. I think this is a really important aspect of that. Before we go any further, what I want to do is jump to a question from Namib. Do you have any kind of treatment of the cocoa beans to prevent Salmonella, E. coli, and moths, any biological contamination? Really, really big subject.
Very good question. Well, E. coli and Salmonella, we haven't confronted yet with any problems, and normally it will probably we probably get rid of those in the oven at higher temperatures. But although we roast quite low, by the way, but they still won't survive. Yeah. As for moths, that really is a struggle. To be very honest, it's a disaster. But we've experimented with putting our cocoa beans in bags and airtight bags and packing them without any oxygen. But even then, they seem to survive. So we're going to experiment more with some other solutions, but it is difficult to get rid of them.
We do have some other ideas. Of course, in the past, there were some other suggestions made also by other chocolate makers, but some are not really practical.
Freezing.
One suggestion was freezing it, but imagine a full pallet full of cocoa. Yeah, you need quite a large amount of freezer storage to manage that. However, there are some also other ideas and experiments we would like to do to contain the moths problem.
Right. So in my experience, that if you can get the beans below about 13 degrees centigrade, so at what in the US we would say 55 Fahrenheit. So if
Yep.
you can get the beans to below, you don't actually have to take them to freezing. You just need to get them cold. And so that's a little less crazy. And then there is a particular kind of bag from a company called Grain Pro.
Yeah,
And
we know that.
The Grain Pro bag, I'm for not familiar with it,
The good-
is that
Yeah, absolutely.
the Grain Pro bag is specifically designed to be able to be an oxygen barrier, so that as the larvae respirate, what they're doing is they're consuming all the oxygen inside the bag, and they will essentially suffocate themselves over time. So if that's another way to do it. Many people, if they do find themselves with a cocoa moth infestation, what they'll do is they'll put the beans in some sort of container and then use dry ice, carbon dioxide, to basically smother things. So there are some ways to do it. But if you have high ceilings and you've got open beams and metal cross spaces, if the cocoa moth gets up there and starts laying eggs, it's a pain in the behind to get rid of them.
Once they have, let's say, once they have been flying out of the bags, so when you put them in the row or some other bags where we can use air, we can close up airtight. That's okay. But once they're out there somewhere in the EU location, it's very hard to get rid of them. We use pheromones as well to the ones that have escaped. But so we seem to have managed it sort of okayish, but we're not fully satisfied yet. So we're experimenting.
It is a constant struggle to do it. My understanding also, when it comes to things like salmonella and E. coli contamination, the best way to address them is to make sure that at the farm level, there's no cross-contamination with animals. So if there's a dog running across the bed of drying cocoa beans, or if there are chickens nearby or things like that, this is where you need to be really, really careful, because for the most part, the acidity of the cocoa beans during fermentation is going to keep organisms like salmonella and E. coli from proliferating. It is this contamination. So you need to be careful. So going through the procedures at the farm level and the cooperative level to make sure that there's no animal cross-contamination is one of the best ways to ensure that you won't have a salmonella and E. coli problem. If you're roasting in an oven, as opposed, or a drum roaster, either one, if you have the ability to inject humidity into the drum, that this humidity will kill those bacteria at a lower temperature and in a shorter contact time. So increasing, so those are other ways that you can address salmonella and E. coli contamination if you're aware of them during things.
Disinfection at the oven with some humidity. However, it also affects the way the beans are roasted. We are still studying on keeping, let's say, the same roast profiles using those techniques. That's what we are currently. That's the stage that we are in.
Right. It is a challenge, yes, because everything affects everything. When it comes to other forms of biological contamination, if you have aflatoxin A or ochratoxin contamination, I mean, that is not something that you're probably going to be able to do much of in a small craft factory. You need to address it at the farm level. You need to make sure that they're not contaminated before they're put in the bags and shipped to you. That's my understanding of the way things go. I also want to say hello from Juan Gonzalez of MAPCO, who is up in Canada. He says hello, and he says he's looking forward to seeing both of you at Chocoa this summer. I mean, it's coming up soon. It's June 23rd, 24th, 25th, or something like that. You're gonna make the long journey from Rotterdam to Amsterdam this year, guys?
The thing is, well, actually, I live in Amsterdam, so for me the journey would even be shorter. But no, the thing is that it's exactly the weekend that we are moving to our new factory space. So we're not sure how much time we will have to spend on Chocoa, but sure we'll do our utmost to let's say to schedule some meetings during those days.
Gotcha. And I also want to welcome Juliana, who is a regular visitor who's dialing in from Brazil. Brazil is an origin that you guys purchase beans from. If I jump over to your website and I do a quick share screen, people will know this is the Chocolate Life Live, the website live, not the live stream live. But if you scroll down, I've got a gallery of 9 of the chocolates that you guys make. I took this from your website. I hope you don't mind. But we'll see that Bold Brazil is there in addition to Peru and Bali and other origins. So you tend to focus on, so I think of Peru, Brazil, and Bali as the origins you source mainly from. I don't know if that's entirely true or not. But there's also a question about the cocoa butter that you use. And I want to use that cocoa butter as an introduction into one of the things which I think has impressed me from the very beginning about your approach. And we can come into some of the history of it as well, is that this whole idea of blending, right? So in the world of specialty chocolate, craft chocolate, it is almost a religion, right? That no form of blending happen. So we're going to treat each roast batch, right, as an individual thing. We're going to teach each batch coming out of the melanger as its own thing, that somehow the primacy of the batch is somehow intertwined into the ethics or the ethos of what specialty chocolate is all about, craft chocolate is all about. But that's not what you're doing, right? You tend to, well, you know, I know you do roast blending. I know you do the equivalent of Solera blending out of rum and brandy and related spirits. You know, talk about that and talk about cocoa butter as well.
Yeah, and origin blending. Just one quick on the origins. We're just about to launch a new bar from a new Ecuadorian cacao called La Perla, and it's from Hacienda Victoria, and we will launch it in a couple of weeks. So there will be another new origin on the list of origins that we use.
So this is the first time. This is the first time this bar has been announced. It's the world premiere announcement.
I think so.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
Cool. Right, you heard it here first, folks. I'm going to take the win. You heard it here first, folks.
And just,
it's not just only the, let's say, our bar announcement, but it's also a new origin. Hacienda Victoria it's a new variety they have released. So it's more like has porcelana qualities. So it will be totally a new flavor experience from Ecuador.
Yeah, so Hacienda, it's a new variety for Hacienda Victoria as well, and I think we are the first chocolate makers to work with it.
Yeah, gotcha.
But by and large, if you look at the origins that we source, we try to find origins that not all chocolate makers have, because there's so many cocoa chameleon, which is great cacao, no doubt about it. There's so many Maya Mountain Baileys, there's so many Sambirano, Madagascar in the world, that we try to pick origins that are, let's say, less easy to find. It also brings some extra challenges in terms of, because you have to source from cacao producers that are not always as consistent as maybe as, for example, Cocoa Chameleon is, but by and large, what we like a lot to get some different origins and different flavor profiles, and also to have the whole range of different flavors. So Brazil is more firm and more profound in flavor. The Pura is very fruity and acidic. The new Ecuador is very smooth and mellow. The Bali is like everyone's friend. So that's the way we try to differentiate between the origins. But about blending, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Actually, when we started off our adventure, our plan was to make only origin blends. So no single origins, just one blend or a couple of blends of origins. Starting with a Dutch origin blend, or Dutch original as we call it now, and maybe adding a Swiss blend or Italian blend of origins that are popular in those countries. Actually, but we also, because we were fascinated about all the differences between the origins, we decided also to make single origin bars. So we do have a blend, and our Dutch original we won for the milk and vegan that we sent in for the Academy of Chocolate. We won even prizes with it, and our Dutch original is positioned slightly lower in terms of price than our single origin bars. The cacao that we use is slightly less expensive, but yet you are able to make the right combination. You can bring out a lot of interesting flavors and complexity into your bar, also using let's say more simple cacao varieties. This is what we like.
One of the reasons why we do that, perhaps we did not explain it, but it was also from the wine industry. So we also like to take an approach of chocolate making based on the philosophy of making wine. So therefore, what we strive to is to make chocolate to have. What makes a good wine is a complex in taste and has a long aftertaste. So that's what we also try to achieve into chocolate, making very complex tasting bars with a very nice tasting profile with a long aftertaste.
Well, what I would also say, if I can jump in, if I may, is that for me, one of the things that I've learned is that not every bean deserves to stand alone in a bar, right? Mm-hmm. And that any given bean is going to react to roast profiles, perhaps in some very, very profound ways, but those ways are going to be somewhat limited. And so being able to say, for example, in a roast blend, I like this time and temperature combination, and I like this time and temperature combination. Why don't I blend the two together rather than trying to find some quote unquote optimum roast, which is somewhere in between, which is not as interesting as either of those two. For me, the idea of blending, represents a whole new range of creative opportunities.
Absolutely.
The Dutch is more, let's say, a classic type of origin blending. But as you already, thank you for.
So this one here. I mean, I only have the milk, right?
Yeah, this one. We have a dark one and a vegan milk one from that series.
So these is a blend of different origins, which let's say cannot stand on its own, in our opinion. But if you combine them together, you have a nice symphony of flavors, which make it complex. But for example, take the Bold Brazil. Take the Bold Brazil, Brazilian cacao. We won silver during the Academy Awards last year. The thing is what we use a multi-roast profile, meaning we take one batch of one single origin cacao, in this case from the Para region, and what we do, we divide it up into several batches. And
three batches.
In this case, 3 batches, and each batch gets a different roasting profile. We don't believe there is one holy roasting profile for one bean that releases all flavors. No. What we do is certain beans can be so exciting that if you use one particular roasting profile, you accentuate, for example, the nuts. If you use another profile, you use the fruity flavors. And when you combine those roasting profiles together, those different batches, again, in one bar, you get an extra complex flavored bar. And this is how we won silver with this Bold Brazil. Because Brazil is actually a very interesting origin. Most people think that there are no interesting cacaos available in Brazil, but there are interesting. And especially if you use multi-roasting techniques, you can make them interesting.
It's also interesting about the Brazil. It is a challenge because almost each bag of this cooperative is different. So usually what we do is actually when we get a new bag, we taste the beans and we test them sometimes, and we apply one of the roast profiles to a different bag. So it's also that specific bags are more suitable for specific roast profiles. So this is also a way of blending. Specific batches get specific profiles, and I'm not sure if you remember when you visited us in 2020. We had a batch of Brazil. At that time, the Brazil was really like orange peel, cherries, and deep chocolate notes, coffee notes, a bit like a Zachertorte from Vienna. And the Brazil that we have now, it has more herbal, more flowery herbal, and more white wine notes. So you do get differences, and it is a challenge if you work with different roast profiles to keep them updated. We also had a couple of batches where we used 2 roast profiles for Brazil simply because we couldn't find the roast profile number 3, a suitable batch for a roast profile number 3. So you have to make some variation. But yeah, so origin blending, roast blending. We also blend different aging stages. So if we age the chocolate, we sometimes age chocolate depending upon the type of cacao. And so what we can do is like age 2-year-old chocolate with 1-year-old chocolate and maybe some freshly conched chocolate. And if you take I think Jan-Willem mentioned my background is wine. If a wine is too young to drink or too harsh or it has too acidic, you can decant it, which is what we would say the cheap and dirty way of making it drinkable on short notice. Or you can put away the bottle and store it in your cellar and wait a couple of years. And for us, if we look at chocolate, conching the chocolate is a similar way of decanting the wine. What you do with conching is you sort of push out the flavors, and by adding a lot of oxygen and some higher temperatures into the chocolate, it brings out very direct fruity flavors, like the decanting of the wine does. But if you age the chocolate, you get more rustic tertiary and tertiary aromas, what we call, and secondary aromas in your chocolate. So the direct fruitiness sort of disappears, but it brings on some other very interesting flavors and aromas that linger on a lot longer.
So what we do is that we age the same batch. We put it on stock in stainless steel containers, and then they age. And what we do is then we take, for example, a freshly ground batch, and we combine it, Solera style, as you call it in the wine, different aging stages together. So therefore, you get an even more complex flavor.
So at some point, we can expect the Louis XIII of Heinde and Verre chocolate, right?
We should work on that. Yeah, it's a good idea. Very good.
Right. So before we jump away from this topic, I want to recognize Annie, who's coming in from Brazil. She contacted me yesterday on Instagram. I believe she is originally from Europe, perhaps Germany, I believe, given the language in many of her posts. And she's excited to be a part of watching today from Brazil. So Annie, thank you very much for joining us. Now, if I recall correctly, when you were telling me about how you put together this bar for me, that the beans from this are from Bali, but you had the particular good fortune of being able to not only be able to track this back to an individual farm level, but to individual bags. And so again, you went through the process of, I have 2 or 3 bags from this particular farm, but for what it is we want to do for clay for this bar, it's like, this is the bag we're going to use, because it had, if I remember correctly.
That's right. We are actually fortunate to work with. We should give credits here to Dejan from BG Cacao. He might tune in. I'm not sure. He told me he wanted to tune in as well. But BG Cacao is trading Indonesian cacao, and we work closely together with him. And actually, he works together with his cooperative on Bali. So when we first got a batch of Bali bags from him, we told him, hey, we like this, and this bag the best, and those 3 are also great, different. And then he told me he was working on a system with the cooperative to be able to trace back each bag to the farmer group level, to be honest. So the ones that we used for you was from one farmer group, and in our Bali bar there's 2 farmer groups present. One of the farmer groups gets 2 roast profiles, and the other farmer group gets only 1 roast profile. And this we blend into the Bali single origin bar.
Well, through the miracle of modern technology, Dejan says you're too kind, Evaldo. So he is tuned in. And for me, this is one of the great things about being able to do. One of the great things about being able to do these kinds of interviews in this format. Well, I liked the sort of radio nature of Clubhouse. What I missed was, the kind of, you're able to see me, I'm able to see you, everybody's able to, see what it is that's going on. We can, hold things up and demonstrate things. And I think that's, really, really a fabulous aspect of this. And I would say to Dejan, I may be doing some work with some vanilla producers in Indonesia. I hope that this will bring me to Bali at some point in the near future, and I would love to have an opportunity to come and see what it is that you're doing and connect the dots. So for me, it's really exciting to be able to talk with you guys, and then find out who you're sourcing through, and then have an opportunity to go and visit them and see that operation and go, this is very, very cool. It's one of the reasons why I love what it is that I do. What I want to tell you, so it's interesting to me that you're moving into a new factory, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'm going to guess that part of the new space is more storage. So more storage for beans, because what you've just said is you've gone from, you're now providing chocolate to 11 countries, one of which is the United States, and we'll get to that. So you need more space to store ingredients. You need more space to store finished chocolate in order to age it, right? So you can put things together. But you also, if people go and take a look at the photograph, the images that's behind you, if what they do is they go to the Chocolate Life and they go to the homepage, you'll see that we have a bunch of melangers sitting over here. There's some storage of stuff in the background, obviously beans. So how is the move to the new space changing the way you're thinking about production? You're getting a new roaster, you're changing your roasting. Now, I know that you have two. One is a drum roaster. You do some stuff in a convection oven as well. And when you think about roast blending, not only are you doing time, but you're doing technologies of roasting at the same time, which you just like, the variables there are just like making my head explode.
The number of combinations is infinite. That's
Infinite,
true.
but it gives also a lot of tools for chocolate makers to play around to get the desired result.
We actually have sourced a new convection oven which is fully programmable, so which helps us to program profiles more precisely, which is there's two reasons for that. One is to have a greater, let's say, instrumentarium, greater, more ways of roasting and more subtle ways of roasting the chocolate. But also, if we want to hire, we're probably on the verge also hiring some extra staff to help us make the chocolate. And then it can be easy to have a fully pre-programmed settings of all the different roasting.
So basically, moving to the new location gives us the opportunity to invest more, to bring more machines on the floor, to have more techniques available, but also to expand to more personnel and more storage.
Right. But are you committed? Are you committed to melangers? Or I mean, many people. Yeah. When I think about many companies, for example, here in the United States, Minot would be one. French Broad, another. I mean, one of the things they did is they moved out of melangers into ball mills. Dandelion is keeping their melangers at their facility, at their store, but they've moved into a ball mill line for their factory. They're fundamentally different chocolate making styles. They produce very, very different kinds of chocolate.
For now, of course, we stick to the traditional melange because we have some very nice results with it. However, we explore all kinds of techniques, so we don't rule out the options of other techniques as well, as long as it serves to get the most flavor out of bean and to add complexity.
And also to be very honest, to scale up. Most of the chocolate makers, when they scale up to a specific size, they move to ball mills. That's what we've seen. By the way, just I wanted to mention the melanges that you see on the picture. You know, you said, I think in the post that you said we do some things different. Well, actually, we started off making a big mistake by sourcing the melangers straight from India ourselves, and actually that was done on advice of one of the guys from Maru from Vietnam, who said, well, at some point you're going to source your own melangers. And we thought, why don't start at that point? So we started sourcing our own melangers from India, which was really a disaster, to be honest, because they're not reliable enough. So there's now a graveyard of Indian melangers that we are now getting rid of, and we have some new ones. But just for now, we stick with the melangers, but we don't rule out that we move to other techniques when we need to scale further.
Gotcha. So when you think about, the hour is almost up. It has just flown by. We're into the last 10 minutes. I want to remind people who are watching us live that they can on YouTube click the like button, or if they're on LinkedIn or Facebook, do the same, so that people can find us. Also, if you do have questions, you're watching and you have questions for Jan Willem and Ewald, please put them into the chat. We'll get to them. And also to remind people that The Chocolate Life and The Chocolate Life Live are a labor of love. If you're not a member, please go over to thechocolatelife.com, click the join button. And even if you're going to join for free, these are challenging times, and I realize that there are lots of demands on everyone's resources. But if you have an opportunity to support what it is that I'm doing, of course, I'm incredibly appreciative of anything that you can do. Before we jump, I'm sorry.
I see a question about fluid bed roasters.
Yeah, so we got a couple of questions. I'm going to take them in order. So we're going to do this. So from Teresa, who is here on a regular basis, who just says her inner chocolate geek is over the top intrigued. Can't wait to add H&V chocolate to my life. Teresa, absolutely. If you're in the United States right now, one of the primary sources for the chocolate is the website Bar and Cocoa. Right now, there are only 2 bars that are listed on the website, and one of them is out of stock. And so what I would suggest you do is you go to the Heinde Verre website, look at the different varieties that are available, most of which are on, not most of which, but many of which are on my website at the moment, The Chocolate Life, for today's post. Call up Bar and Cocoa, write them and say, I want you to source this. And so the next time there's an order, they will make sure that it's in the order and you can get it. So the way to get the chocolate in the United States, and Mark, if you're still here, contact Bar and Cocoa and let them know what it is that you want. That's the way to get it here in the United States. All right. So Teresa, thank you very much for that vote of support. We have from Namib, what do you think of fluid bed roasters, and have you tested them? And for those people in the who may be watching who have no idea what a fluid bed roaster is, can you describe what fluid bed roasting is for those of us? And if the answer is no, if the answer is you don't know anything about them and you haven't tested them, that's good. That's okay as well.
We have tested actually one fluid bed roaster, although I always find it difficult to understand the real difference between the fluid bed roaster and the convection oven. And the way I would put it, for example, the convection oven that we use now is a highly professional baking oven, and it can sort of modulate the temperature. This is what you also see with fluid bed roasters. There's hot air being blown into the chamber where the cacao is, and it's either the cacao is in a kind of drum or in kind of space where it's stirred around. Anyways, it's surrounded by hot air, and the thing is, you can reduce the temperature in this roaster, or you can raise the temperature, and it will adapt quickly. That's the nice thing about fluid bed roasters. So it gives you a lot of control. We did test one, and when we started off, yes, it did work well, but the batch size was quite small. And when we started off, we started sourcing a drum roaster, which gives on the opposite totally no control. But once you adapt to your roaster, you can get very nice roast profiles. Mm-hmm. And the oven that we have now is close to a fluid bed roaster in terms of functionality, because it gives us more control features. But if you look at every oven has its different flavor profile, and what I find intriguing is that it has to do with the mass of the oven and the amount of the batch size that you're using. That's at least what we found out is a very important factor. So in our drum roaster, it's a huge thing of hundreds and hundreds of kilos. Once it's warm, you get a very different heat transmission from any fluid bed roaster, because a fluid bed roaster doesn't have mass, but it simply blows hot air. And actually, we're still testing how to mimic the effect of our drum roaster into a fluid bed section.
Yeah. Right. So what I would say to Namib is there's an enormous amount of experience which comes out of what I think of as the technical coffee roasting community. And one of the things that's really interesting about very high-end coffee roasters is how instrumented they are. And so the ability to have multiple thermocouples in the oven, and then to connect them not only to a piece of software which is recording, right, the profile, but then actually to be able to use that profile through a programmable computer, a PLC, to actually control the temperature. Oh no! No! Sorry. No! Okay. Sorry, guys. That was my phone going off. Right. I forgot to put everything in Do Not Disturb before I started. The phone went off and I couldn't take the call, so I was interrupted. I can't reach around behind my rig in order to be able to turn the phone off. So I excuse everyone there. So we're talking about
the coffee, right? Yeah. So what it means is that you can have lots of controls over the temperature that's flowing around the beans, but what you cannot control is the amount of mass that's behind it. It's like if you crash into a car which is very heavy, you're completely crashed. Whereas if the car is less heavy, you get it. And it's also a temperature transmission. The formula is mass times a constant times the temperature difference, and the mass controlled in the fluid bed oven.
Right.
This is a big difference.
Right. So, when I think about that particular concept, one of the things I talk about is recovery time. So, for example, if I have a roaster which is of 35 kilo capacity, right, and I get it up to 150 C, just picking a number. But then what I do is I put 35 kilos of beans, which are at 20 C. What happens is the temperature of the roaster quenches and it gets very, very cold. And now we have this notion of recovery time, which is how much heat can I apply to be able to get back to the temperature that I'm looking for. When I have, for example, a convection oven, I can open up the door, I can throw in 1 pan or 10 pans, close the door, press go, and the oven is almost instantly back at the temperature that I want, right? And so I would say that one of the differences, Nemib, between a non-technical coffee roaster and a fluid bed roaster and a convection oven is this notion of airflow. So many technical coffee roasters also enable you to blow air through the drum. And so what you can do, for example, if you've got a sort of a wet process Sumatran, you might not have a whole lot of airflow because you're looking for this dark, muddy bottom, right? But if you've got an Ethiopian and you're looking for these high, sort of whiny, bright notes, what you might do is, blow more air through it because you will be able to achieve that more quickly. And so it's, understanding that just baking in general, cooking in general, is about the physics of heat transfer, and that each one of these different methods has a different way of transferring heat. Now, so for example, a fluid bed roaster blows air through the beans. And so there's a lot of tumbling of the beans that you don't get in a convection oven, but that you do get in a conventional drum roaster. And so, one is not inherently better than another, right? They're all deliver different results. And it's a question of understanding what the characteristics are and how to be able to control the variables that you have at your disposal.
We've been testing a couple of months now to mimic the characteristics of our traditional drum roaster, which was also with a ventilator, so there's some airflow as well in the oven. And we finally managed to get similar results from the two ovens, but it took really a lot of work to crack the nut. And the interesting thing about roasting, and we already mentioned our multiple roasting techniques, the interesting thing is that just a few degrees Celsius and a few minutes or a few seconds can make a difference. For example, in the Pura that we have, if you roast it slightly longer and lower, you get more like red fruit and coffee notes. If you roast it slightly higher and at a shorter time frame, you get this typical citric notes and walnut way of flavor of Pura. And it's only minor differences that make huge differences in flavor and aroma.
Right. And so one of the things that I often suggest that people do is that what they do is they don't roast by their noses, right? So, what you do is you roast until it smells right? One of the lessons I learned from Ed Seguin was, well, if it's in the air, right, it's not in the beans. Right. And also your nose tends to get fatigued over the course of time. Right. And so if you have, for example, a drum roaster, which has got a sampling port, what you can do is you can do a roast of beans at a particular temperature and robotically just pull the beans out, a sample out, right, at a certain time, and let all of the beans cool to room temperature. And then you have a grid of time and temperature. And now what you can do is you can go in and say, ooh, this time and temperature are bad, and this time and temperature represent something I think that could be interesting, and I want to explore it a little more. But if you're roasting in the traditional craft notion, and one of the definition of craft is I'm making decisions a la minute. As things are going, I'm making creative decisions. And so that's one way to think about craft, as opposed to more industrial making, which is the art is about how to figure out how to program the machines, right? That it makes sense, if you have that option, to be able to set up roasts in a way that enable you to evaluate a lot of different roasts, more or less at the same time, but not while your nose is fatigued, right, from smelling things, and when all of the beans are at the same temperature. If you're smelling it and you're pulling it out and you're cutting the beans and it's warm, you're not experiencing the flavor of the beans properly, right?
So
because
the way to really test the different roasts is to make out of them.
Yeah.
Because only after grinding them to 20 micron or whatever size you're aiming at. Our chocolate usually is between 15 and 25 micron. That's the only way to really know what the roast is doing. You can't judge a roast. You cannot judge a bean by eating it. You can judge it, sort of judge it by grinding it in a pestle and mortar by hand. But the only way to really test it is to make batches. So if we do a new cacao and we look for the optimal roasting, or at least 2 or 3 roast profiles that we're looking for, we sometimes even take 10 or 20 samples of 1 kilo before we get to the right point.
And you have to go all the way, because especially in the end there are always some not so nice things.
Right. Yeah.
When you micron, all the flaws come out.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but one of the things that I learned about doing this, and we're at the hour, and so what I want to do is we got a couple more questions, and I want to make sure we have the time for them before we close. And I want to be respectful of your time. It's getting to be the end of the day. Is that one of the great things about structuring a grid is that what it enables you to do is it enables you to be able to say, here is a range of roasts that I know are likely to work. And so when you get a new bag in, you can go there and it much more quickly dial something in. And you can say, here's a whole range of time and temperatures I know are not going to work. Right. And so I can avoid them. And so with experience, having that rather than just going on I'm roasting by nose, what you have is you can develop a documented history. A notebook is really, really important. Which will enable you to be able to much more quickly understand how a particular bean profile raw might translate into a particular bean profile roasted. And then if what you're doing is you're judging the roast by the chocolate that it makes, not the roast, it provides this documentation which enables you to guide the process much more quickly, right? Which I think is the important thing. What I do want to do is I want to say hello from Maria Salvador Jimenez. Maria is with Darnhauer in Zaandam, so she's not too far from where you guys are. Maria, thank you very much. I mean, absolutely outstanding Dutch chocolate being celebrated. That certainly is a part of what it is that we're doing today. And Maria, I would love to have you on as a guest sometime in the near future, talking about what it means to try to source and sell specialty cocoa around the world. I think that would be a really, really interesting process. So Namib says, thanks very much for the responses to think about roasting and fluid bread roasters. I would agree. And now we have from Chocolateverkopers, a question would be, are you thinking about in the future making inclusion bars with wine, or perhaps, now that you're talking about it, coffee, and then some other herb and spice combinations from near and far? So,
yes.
what's on the creative horizon? What's on the creative horizon?
Have introduced with limited edition some playful as the anniversary bar of your site, of course. So we want to play with more. Of course, we have some experiments already in the factory. So yeah, who knows in the future?
Could be.
You're holding your cards close to your chest for this, beyond the announcement of your new Ecuador bar, right?
To a little bit of unclose. We're also, as you probably know, we make drinking chocolate as well for cafes and bars, and we have the recipe ready to launch in the autumn for a flavored drinking chocolate. Okay. So that will be on in I think September, October.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I'd like to collaborate on you, because I now may be, as I say, I may be working with some vanilla, and I have sources in Indonesia as well as in Madagascar, is I would love to do a vanilla origin blend kind of thing, because I think there's some, we tend to think of vanilla necessarily as bad because it's normally used as a masking aroma, and people tend to think of single origin. Why am I focusing only on the origin of the cocoa beans? Why can't I focus on the origin of another ingredient like vanilla? What would be the difference between the same chocolate made with a Madagascan vanilla as opposed to an Indonesian vanilla, as a Mexican, Tahitian? Lots of interesting room for thinking about origins when it comes to the ingredients we're using, not just the cocoa beans.
There is a chance that we come with a very special Heinde Verre vanilla bar in the somewhere next year.
Oh, I'm really excited about that. I mean, I'm a person who likes vanilla when done properly.
I think I think we can bet a bottle of wine that you have never tasted the origin of the vanilla that we are going to use.
Okay. If as long as we can agree on the dollar value of the wine, I'm happy to go and happy to do that. But I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to taste it and be confounded. I mean, one of the ways I described, people say to me, what's your favorite kind of chocolate? And I answer that a number of ways. One of which is whatever I'm eating is my favorite chocolate. Very, 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 very self-serving and a flip answer in many respects. But putting a bar of chocolate in my mouth that challenges my perceptions of what chocolate can be is something that I strive for every day. It's when something comes along and I go, oh my gosh, I'm looking for that OMG experience whenever I possibly can. I want that. Unfortunately, it's 20 years in, it's not as common as it used to be. But I'm still just, it is part of what it is that drives my search and part of the passion, just to be, here is something that just sort of confounds my ideas of what chocolate is. So we're, past the hour. Anything you guys want to close with today? Just as the hour ends, more of the future of Heinde and Verre. And before we end today's live stream?
Good question. Actually, you leave us speechless. Let's say
so this is from among people who's like, if we turn the lights off, we let our hair down, metaphorically speaking, we could continue with this conversation for the next couple of hours, leaving you speechless. I don't know where that leaves me, right?
Well, we will be watch us this month. We will be introducing a new bar, of course. There will be more news ahead. And of course, this year will be, as we already mentioned, a very exciting year because we're going to move into a factory which offers way more opportunities to produce more interesting stuff.
Well, so I just was speaking with Jack and Caroline, corresponding, not speaking, with Jack and Caroline at Chocoa. There is some small chance that I will be in Europe at that time of the year. I'm trying to see if I can coordinate that trip with another thing that I want to do in Portugal at the same time. If I can, would love to come by and see you and do an update. Perhaps maybe do a live stream from Chocoa. That would be an interesting thought. But in any event, what I want to do is I want to thank you both very much for being so generous with your time, for being so generous with sharing what it is that and what it is that you've learned with everybody who's been here today. I want to remind people who are watching now, you can continue the comments either here on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook. I try to respond to them. If you go to the Chocolate Life Live, you can comment as a member, you can comment on the post. For today's live stream, I want to let everybody know, if they do go over to the Chocolate Life, what they can do is I do maintain a calendar of all of the live streams that are going on. So here is the page. So here's today's live stream. Here are the things that are scheduled for the next week. And then there's an archive to all of the past live streams that you can go to and find them. Or if you want to, you can go straight to the YouTube channel and all of them, and you can see that's live. What I wanted, let me do this. If I embedded into today's live stream, no. Yeah, I did. I'm wondering if I play this. Oh, yeah, cool. So this is the first time I've done it. I've actually embedded the link to the live stream in the page. And so we're seeing the live stream in a delay. Pretty cool. Had never done it before, but I got distracted. What I want to do is say, thank you very much, gentlemen. I appreciate your time. You're doing this. I have been a fan from the moment I tasted your chocolate. And that's what it is that drives me to want to do this. I want to recognize people who are doing good work, especially people who are doing work that sort of challenges a lot of the conventions that most of the craft chocolate world somehow thinks that it has to follow. And your work for me is exemplary of that ethos. And I have yet to taste something that you've done that I wasn't impressed with, and fit and finish, flavor, all those kinds of stuff. I'm just, again, a big fan. And I'm glad that I've had the opportunity to introduce some more people to the work that you're doing. And hopefully that 11 countries will become more than 11 countries after you have a chance to open up your new factory and meet all that demand. And with that, we're done for the day. I want to say thank you. I hope to find you back here again at future Chocolate Life Lives. And to remind everybody as we go out, if you're working with chocolate and you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong.
It's been a pleasure.